I thought you'd never finish those dishes. Come on in and sit down.
All right. I was going to straighten out that desk, but it can wait till tomorrow, I guess.
Oh, sure. Say, by the way, I asked old Sam Robbins to dinner tomorrow night.
Oh, you did you? How charming.
You don't like him, do you? He's a nice old guy.
He's crude. He slaps you on the back, and he bellows, and he...
You're as bad about old Sam as Junior is about spinach.
Well, if Junior is any way about spinach, it is your fault. He always liked it until he saw you making faces about it. For all the silly ideas. Spinach is very good for him, and...
Yes, and old Sam would be good for you, too. Maybe he'd take some of the stiffness out of your backbone.
Well, there's no need to be insulting, John. Our family has always found it advantageous to watch the company we keep.
Well, old Sam's company isn't so bad. There's a lot of brain behind that crude exterior. Why, he's just had a very scholarly book on folklore published.
He has?
Yes.
There? Why, isn't that remarkable? Well, now, maybe I should give a tea for him. A literary tea.
Which just goes to show how silly some prejudices are. We grow up with a lot of notions which we wouldn't have if we really thought about them. And we'll be discussing some of these prejudices, I'll wager, as we proceed with this particular excursion in science. For our science reporter, Emerson Markham, has been talking with Dr. Regina Weltfish of the Department of Anthropology at Columbia University, with the result that he's here to report what Dr. Weltfish said about science and the race problem. Ladies and gentlemen, Emerson Markham.
Thank you, Bob Stone, and how do you do, everyone? First of all, let's go back to your school days when you were studying geography. Much of what you think about race today dates back to that early experience.
How do you mean, Emerson?
Well, the geography book was a big one with many interesting pictures that led your mind toward far-off places. There was a black man leaning against a palm tree dressed in a loincloth and doing nothing, and a yellow man pulling a rickshaw like a human horse. And on still another page, a white man dressed in a collar and a tie with a lot of smokestacks behind him. Most of us got the idea then that dark skin was somehow connected with doing nothing and wearing a sarong instead of a business suit, and that yellow skin was connected with pigtails and menial labor.
What are you leading up to, Emerson?
That we're not yet mature enough to untangle these things and to realize that clothing and occupations are not hereditary in the same way as blue eyes or red hair. Bob, if you were asked to name the races of man, what would you say?
Well, let me see. The white, the black, the yellow, red.
Yes, your first impulse would be to classify people by the color of the skin. And then you might add that the yellow race has straight black hair and flat faces, and the black race kinky hair and broad noses, and the white race all kinds of hair from kinky to straight and all kinds of noses. And I'll grant that you might observe such broad differences in different parts of the world's population.
Well, is that bad?
Well, what I'm getting at is this. How can these external differences help you to judge a man's moral character, his ability to participate in a democratic society, his ability to think up new and fruitful ideas, and his artistic capacities, or even his ability to be your neighbor, your business partner, or your good friend? A human being is more than skin and hair and nose.
Granted. It's a natural thing to do, though, isn't it, to judge by externals?
Well, yes, for most people, Bob. But it's the job of the anthropologist, as Dr. Weltfish pointed out, to live in distant lands among strange and unfamiliar peoples, to learn their languages and to investigate the whys and the wherefores of their life and their customs. At first, their actions are strange and incomprehensible, but in the course of time, through the veil of unfamiliar custom, the investigator begins to discern personalities. People so like those he has known at home, the grouch, the cheat, the generous man, the practical joker, and the meddling mother-in-law, that he forgets their unfamiliarity and begins to be part of the new community in which he finds himself.
Oh, I think I see. He discovers they really aren't so different from himself.
Right. And this discovery of fellow minds in different skins is one of the most important discoveries that the anthropologist has made.
Yes, but we can't all be anthropologists.
Oh, you've hit on the difficulty, Bob. It's like things seen under a microscope. The scientist finds it hard to convey it to those without his technical skills.
Is there any way you could convey the idea to non-scientists?
Well, it's not too much to hope that in the near future, our educational system will produce a generation of cosmopolitan people who can penetrate the mist of cultural and physical differences to find the human being underneath. The booklets to promote intercultural understanding designed for our armed forces abroad as a practical necessity are equally necessary in our civilian life.
Yes, but Emerson, aren't you overlooking intelligence in all this? How would some of the other races rate there?
A good point. Well, let's take a look at the intelligence test for just a moment and see. It's one of the most widely misunderstood scientific techniques. At first, it was hoped that these tests would clearly show hereditary intelligence. Most scientists believe that there is some hereditary ingredient in what we are pleased to call intelligence, you know. But since their extensive use during and following the last war, the intelligence test is little used for this purpose. We now know that the intelligence score shows hereditary intelligence plus the effects of everything that happens to the child in the course of his life.
Well, what do you mean, everything that happens to him?
Well, as an example, take these cases. After 3 months of extra reading lessons, the IQ scores of some Pennsylvania school children rose nearly 12 points, and poor children placed in good foster homes gained as much as 20 points on their intelligence scores. So you see, if schooling and home environment can have such marked effects upon test scores, then the intelligence test alone cannot be used to test inborn intelligence.
Yes, but there are many people who can't overlook physical differences. Some people have a very definite reaction to differences in skin color.
Well, I'd like to point out what Dr. Weltfish had to say about that, and it's this. Upon chemical analysis, we find that the main color ingredients of the skin are keratin, like carrots giving a yellowish tinge, and melanin, contributing the brown tone. Pink shades are derived from the blood vessels that show through the skin. Now, all human skin, blonde, brunette, or brown, with the exception of the albino, has some of these chemicals in it. The darker shades more melanin, the lighter shades less, and the yellower tints more keratin. In all human beings, the neck and elbows have more melanin, the palms and soles more keratin.
So then, while it seems at first glance skin color differences are great, analysis reveals that it's a matter of degree of difference rather than of kind.
That's it exactly. And since we so commonly refer to blood relatives, it might be worth considering this factor in connection with racial categories. The 4 groups into which blood has been classified, A, B, AB, and O, according to the ability of the red blood cells to clump, occurs in all varieties of mankind. Even the percentages of each are the same among Lapps and Swedes and Australian natives and West Europeans. And it is genetically possible for you to have a different blood type from your mother, and the same blood type as an African native.
Well, that's very interesting. Do we have the same kind of brain, all of us?
The physical structure of the brain has also been the subject of scientific investigation, Bob. And despite the most careful dissection, the anatomist is unable to distinguish the brain of a Javanese from the brain of a Dutchman, or the brain of an African Zulu from that of a United States businessman or a baseball player.
But we still have a long way to go, it seems to me. I mean, just take their ideas of what's beautiful. They're so different from ours.
But distaste for physical differences is a cultivated thing, Bob, like a taste for olives. We all know that standards of beauty have changed down through the ages, and the Venus de Milo or the rotund beauty of Rubens would not appeal to us now as would, well, Greta Garbo or Lana Turner. However, we can, through education, broaden our margin of tolerance for the beauty and the ways of many different people, and to make our living together a worldwide cooperative effort rather than a disastrous conflict.
Ignorance accounts for a lot of race prejudice, doesn't it?
Yes, but besides there is the factor of fear, Bob. Technically, in individuals, unfounded fears and suspicion of others is called paranoia. However, the fear reactions that are manifest in group prejudice have a very real historical basis.
How do you mean, historical?
Well, it is little realized that in the Old South, only 16% of the white people were large plantation owners, while the rest of the whites were poor farmers and artisans. Their prospects for work and for making a success of their farm were seriously threatened by Negro slave labor, or by the Negro freedmen who would feel impelled to work for less return. And yet, if we look at the matter objectively, it was not the Negro who was to blame, nor is a paranoid-like hatred of the Negro the solution. Similarly with the Chinese, the Mexican, and the Southeastern European, all have at various times in the past been brought here as a cheap and docile labor supply, threatening the interests of the resident workers. The answer does not lie in group hatred, but in group planning.
What particular kind of group planning?
On the part of the workers in their organizations, and of management in the shop, and a general readiness to plan together and to compromise if need be. Various types of insecurity and fear are important elements in race prejudice, but job insecurity heads the list. Only by a combination of a humane and realistic employment policy and a program of constructive education can race prejudice, one of the sorest spots of our social life, be eliminated.
With all that good information under our belts, most of us will probably stop to consider what we've just heard before we let any racial prejudice enter our thinking. Our thanks to you, Mr. Markham, and to Dr. Weltfish for the information. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like a copy of a paper by Dr. Regina Weltfish of the Department of Anthropology at Columbia University, a paper which contains all the facts we've discussed here, plus others we haven't had time to go into, all you have to do to get a copy is address your requests to Excursions in Science, in care of the station to which you are now listening, asking for scientific paper number 183, Science and the Race Problem. That's Science and the Race Problem, scientific paper number 183. Your copy will be sent you free of charge. And now, once again, it's time to consider the scientific questions you listeners have sent in for answers. The answers you will hear reflect the most accurate and up-to-date information available, since they are based on facts provided by staff members of the General Electric Research Laboratory or of other equally trustworthy institutions. Well, Emerson, here's the first one. It comes from a gentleman who says his drugstore display windows become covered with vapor and steam on cold days. This ruins the covers and labels of the various products displayed. He'd appreciate any suggestions that we might offer.
Before we offer any suggestions, let's clarify our questioner's understanding of what is actually causing the condition. The steam which appears on the windows is a result of a too humid atmosphere. There's more water vapor in the air than the air can hold when it is chilled by contact with the cold surface of the windows.
Then it looks as if he should either dry the air or warm the windows.
That's it exactly. The outside air on a cold day holds little water vapor, so that if this is drawn in and heated, dry air is obtained. And then if this dry air is circulated through the display window space, there should be little condensation on the windows, even if they are very cold. Now, the other solution would be to warm the windows by directing against them a stream of warm air, as is done in automobiles to prevent sleet from forming on the windshield.
Next, we have this one. How has the tremendous consumption of gasoline, gunpowder, and so forth in the past few years affected the oxygen content of the atmosphere?
Well, there has been no appreciable effect, as the total weight of the atmosphere is so very much larger, you see. Gunpowder, gasoline, and the like are very small factors to consider as having definite effects on the oxygen content of the atmosphere.
Our same correspondent goes on to ask, how is the oxygen balance maintained?
Well, a constant ratio between oxygen and carbon dioxide is maintained by the reciprocal use of these gases by plants and animals. Likewise, the waters of the ocean exercise a control over the amount of carbon dioxide in the air, for when there is an excessive amount present, more is absorbed by the water. Lightning, too, frees a little oxygen from water, and ultraviolet light may also. So you can see that there have been continuously active means of obtaining free oxygen from its compounds since the beginning of the world. Nature has a way of providing for itself, it seems.
It certainly does. Well, to go on, this next inquiry reaches us from a lady who writes that she has a china dish caught within a larger glass bowl at such an angle that it is impossible to separate them. And though she has tried many remedies, she has been unsuccessful. She'd like to separate them without breaking either of the dishes, and she wonders if it's possible.
Well, yes, she might, but of course we can't guarantee results. She might solve her problem by shrinking the inside vessel, the china dish, and expanding the outside vessel, the glass bowl.
Now, Emerson, just how would you propose she shrink a china dish, or for that matter, expand the glass bowl?
Well, it can be done by keeping the inner one cold, say by filling it with ice cubes or ice water, and the outer one warm, not hot, by immersing it in warm or lukewarm water. Hot water is very likely, you see, to cause the bowl to crack.
Yes, we don't get out of here very quickly. We'll be in hot water. So once again, it's thank you, Emerson Markham, and goodbye, everyone, until our next excursion in science.